Welcome back to Midco Sports Tonight. It's time for Saturday Storylines with our FCS experts, and we're going to start with our top 25 matchup that you just saw, UND at USD. And fittingly enough, Alex Heiner and Jay Ellison joined me to talk about it. We'll start with Jay. Everyone kind of looks at the score, 45-7. They think about the offense right away. But I think we need to give some credit to the USD defense. They were absolutely reckless. So what did you see from the Coyotes out there?
Yeah, you know, I mean, they were really, really good all day long. And that obviously was one of the big question marks coming into this game, particularly that rush defense, which is supposed to be a lot better. And it showed out on Saturday, maybe more so even than it has to this point in the season against UND. This Fighting Hawks team could really run the football well, and the Coyotes held them to 102 yards on 30 attempts. That's 3.4 per carry. You're talking about an All-American John Santiago, Brady Oliveira. That's one of the best tandems in the country. So that in and of itself is pretty impressive. Just 257 yards of total offense on the day. UND averaged less than 5 yards per play. They had just 11 first downs, and third down efficiency was really, really good defensively for South Dakota. Held UND to 1 of 12 for the day, also 0 of 4 on fourth down. So all in all, the most complete defensive effort that we've seen to this point from the Coyotes.
Yeah, I asked Bob Nielsen about it after the game. He said they were impressive and they made a statement, so great job by USD. But Alex, moving to you, from UND's perspective, I mean, this is a good team, and this manner of lopsided defeat, it had to be kind of unexpected for the Fighting Hawks. How does North Dakota bounce back from this?
Oh, Kelly, you're right that it was unexpected. I think UND knew this was going to be one of the toughest games on their schedule for a variety of reasons. The revenge factor from last year, the first home game of the year atmosphere at the Dakota Dome, and the fact that USD is a much improved football team. But I don't think anybody saw them getting dominated like this. Injuries certainly played a part. Penalties and miscues did too. But USD was just better from start to finish. And so for North Dakota on the plus side, it's just one game. And remember, they were essentially in the same position last year after non-conference play, and they still went on to have a great season. But with that said, they really need to tighten up some of the glaring mental mistakes they've made over really the last two games, or they could be in real trouble coming up with a very good Montana State team coming to Grand Forks this weekend.
Yeah, a great Montana State team that we saw give SDSU a challenge a bit earlier. But speaking of SDSU, we bring in Tom Neiman to talk about their game over the weekend. USD and UND wasn't the only news. Jackrabbits cruised to a 51-10 win, Tom. What did they really take out of this game? I mean, did they accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, do you think?
I think so. Just a good, solid win, nothing special. Drake is not a very good football team, we know that, but South Dakota State wins 51-10. The first team offense for the Jacks was very good, had the ball 5 times, got 5 touchdowns on those possessions. The first team defense was really good, gave up just 3 points in the first half, and then most of the starters sat out in the second half of this game. But the special teams was very good. Lorenzo Williams with a punt block. Chase Vinatieri made a career-long 51-yard field goal, and then Cade Johnson, redshirt freshman, took a kickoff back 95 yards for a touchdown. So that was exciting, and that kind of adds something to the Jackrabbit attack that they really haven't had, that return game in the last couple of years. So that's exciting. It was just kind of like Garth Brooks coming out, hitting all the right notes, saying the name of the city right, and just everybody goes home happy. Nothing real spectacular, but they get the win.
And Garth isn't done. I think people are looking forward to that. But our FCS wins over the weekend. We had USD, we had South Dakota State. I think everyone's looking forward to Valley Play. To talk a little bit more about that, we bring in Brian Sean up in West Fargo. And Sean, you have an update on NDSU linebacker Nick DeLuca. What is it?
Yeah, good news, I think, for North Dakota State fans, certainly for the football team in the Bison. All-American linebacker Nick DeLuca had a procedure last week on a meniscus. It was a slight tear, but he sounds like he is going to play at some point this season. Maybe in a week, it could be 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but at some point, it sounds like Nick DeLuca is going to start running and getting going and start that rehab process. But for the Bison to get him back for that stretch run, especially when the gauntlet starts with the Youngstown States, Western Illinois, USD, South Dakota States, number 49 should be back on the field for NDSU. So Chris Kleiman and company thrilled about that news after him undergoing that procedure last week on his knee.
Yeah, they got to be happy with that, especially after the injury last year. But let's talk more Missouri Valley stuff. The Valley seems to be helping itself in the non-conference to get more playoff bids. I mean, Valley teams are beating up stronger teams than what the CAA is doing right now, including a 5-2 lead in the Missouri Valley Big Sky Challenge Series. There are 7 teams in the top 25, and that doesn't even include 2-0 Southern Illinois. Of course, the upcoming conference schedule will ruin some of the records, but for everyone at the same time, do you think more teams have a chance of making the playoffs this year, Jay?
More. I think we could see 7. I mean, I don't think out of the question, certainly. And I think, at the same time, I think there's maybe a little more respect than there's due right now. I think UNI probably should be out of the pool after losing on the road at Southern Utah, an unranked Big Sky team. They're 1-2 now on the season. That being said, I think that goes to show you how much respect nationally this conference is getting. We've all seen it time and time again for the last several years, but I think it's, whether or not they do get 7, I guess we'll see. But it's, once if UNI at this point loses 4 or 5 games in the league, they might have gotten away with that in the past. I think they lost that extra little bit.
They probably did. And the Valley gets respect until it comes time to pick in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They won't be 7. They won't get 7 teams in. They only got 4 last year. There were 4 conferences that got 4 teams in. The Valley was one of them. I could see maybe 5 this year, but more than that is probably out of the question.
Yeah, I really think the same thing too, Tom. I think 5. I think that's what you have to hope for. Because even if everybody goes 4-4, then maybe you'd have a chance. But some of those teams are going to separate themselves, especially with some of the tough road games on the schedule. And I think that's where things are going to really be decided. I mean, you look at South Dakota State, Youngstown early. We're going to know a lot more after that game. North Dakota State really doesn't hit the toughest part of their schedule until mid-October when they got to go to Youngstown, when they got to go to South Dakota State. But I just can't see everybody beating everybody so badly. And like Jay said, I think Northern Iowa right now has to have a good run in the conference. And the way South Dakota State, Youngstown, everybody else is playing, it's going to be a tall order, I think, for the Panthers to maybe be that 5th or 6th team.
And Alex, I know
everybody
you're,
just,
there you go.
they just, sorry, Kelly, they just beat each other up too much, I think, in the Valley. 7 teams of the 24 teams in the field that make it. That's almost 1/3 of the teams in the country. And when you factor in all your conference champions getting automatic bids as well, like, again, they had 6 a couple of years ago, so it's not out of the question. But I'm with Tom and with Bichon. I think 5 to 6 is probably going to be about the max, I think, for the Valley this year.
And the
but
Dakota
let's not
schools,
forget, Western Illinois got in at 6-5 as the last team in. So strength of schedule and wins do matter, I think, in this thing.
Yeah, Dakota schools have done themselves big favors with all going 3-0. North Dakota State will beat Robert Morris and get to 3-0 before we get into Valley play. So that's been a big deal early in the season, especially for USD.
Well, it has, and for them. And I think, on the one hand, the Valley's the strength of schedule has been so obvious, and that's a great thing. But on the other hand, it's given these pundits that make the selections when it comes time, it given them a reason. When they look at their conference record and they see 4-4, 3-5, they're not considering who those losses are coming against. They're seeing the record for what it is, and ultimately it ends up hurting the league a little bit when it comes time to actually get those teams into the playoffs. So there's probably always a team or 2 extra that maybe deserves a spot in the postseason, but it's just the fact they just do, like Alex says, they just beat each other up too much. It hurts them.
8 brutal weeks coming
absolutely.
up.
But it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I think we can all agree on
excited
that.
for it. All right, guys. Well, as always, thank you for your insight. Bye weeks for USD and SDSU this weekend. NDSU in action against Robert Morris. But in conclusion, we are all excited for Valley play. And Alex, we're excited to see what UND can do in the Big Sky. So thank you, guys. Coming up next, Jason Andera breaks down all the South Dakota high school football action from the weekend and hands out the weekly game ball. Stay right here.